When you resist a thought, what do you resist it with?
What?
Another thought. Yeah. So it's like a chain, right? And what happens is we recognize that one thought is a thought, and then we have another thought about that thought, but we don't recognize that thought as a thought too. You get that? And that's where that's where you get stuck, right? So how to get out of that, right? How to get out of the activity of the mind is the question. How to get out of the activity of the mind, right? You know, our Zen teacher says, your relationship to your mind determines the quality of your life. Your relationship to your mind determines the quality of your life. So what is the relationship to your mind? If you're not applying awareness, if you're not applying the teaching, if you're not applying what you're practicing in meditation, then the relationship you have with your mind is that you are it. If you're not applying the teaching and the practices, the relationship you have with your mind is you're identified with it. You're identified with the thoughts that happen there. And when you identify with the thoughts that happen there, that identification with the thoughts that happen there produces your personality, right? Your identification with your mind produces a personality. What does that mean? It produces the thinker of the thoughts. Your identification with the thoughts produces the thinker of the thoughts, right? So then the question becomes, how do you get out of that? You know, then in the traditions, they talk about this word refuge, right? Refuge, the refuge of the Sangha, the refuge of the teachings, the refuge of the teacher, right? And in all those cases, what is the practice that's being emphasized, whether we're talking about the teaching, the teacher, or the Sangha? In all those three places that we call a refuge, another refuge means it's a place that you can be safe, yeah? Okay. So where is the place that you can be safe? If you right now are in a mental activity, right? Let's just do this as a little thought experiment. If you right now are in a mental activity, which means you're either experiencing thoughts about the past or the future, that's what a mental activity is, right? In both cases, right, where are you, time-wise? If you're identified with the thought activity, right, that thought activity can only be thinking about the past or the future, okay? So in both those places, the past or the future, you will be identifying yourself with the thinking activity and therefore producing the identity of being the personality. And when you're in the identity of personality, we know what happens, suffering. Okay? So what's the alternative to this? Yeah, the only problem with staying in the now is that staying in the now is something that almost nobody has any ability with. See, because we have all been hypnotized to live in the past and the future. In other words, we've all been hypnotized to live in a thought process. We live our lives in thinking. Right? We live our lives in thinking. And the thing about living our lives in thinking that makes it so insidious, that makes it so difficult, right, is that there's 8 billion of us living our lives in thinking, producing a thought reality and calling it the truth. Yeah? Producing a thought reality and calling it the truth. And within that thought reality, trying to get life to work, right? And within that thought reality, even though what people are doing to get life to work doesn't work, they will never, ever give up. Have you noticed? They will never, ever give up. You know why?
You don't know how. You don't know how to, put the thoughts to rest.
Well, it's worse than not knowing how. It's that the alternative doesn't even exist. Look at it. In the thought world, it's like living in a dream. And when you're dreaming, can you be awake at the same time? It doesn't even exist. Doesn't even exist, right? So how do you get out of the dream? How do you get out of the dream when you wake up in the morning? You wake up, but you wake up from what? From where? From what to what? See, when you're in the dream, is the dream real?
No.
When you wake up, is what you woke up to real? If you're dreaming at night and you're having a nightmare, right, and you're terrified, right, and then you wake up, and that happens automatically, right? We all wake up in the morning, right? When you wake up, where are you? Oh, I'm here in my bedroom.
And you're now in the present.
Yeah, you're in the present when you wake up, right? And is that present real?
Yes.
Yes, it's real.
But I don't stay there very long.
That's right.
Immediately I'm the present is the
That's right.
present.
That's right. Exactly. You wake up, and when you first wake up, it's like, oh, isn't it true? When you first wake up, it's like, oh, I'm here. I'm here. I'm aware of my body. I'm aware of the air. I'm aware of the weather. I'm aware of the room that I'm in, right? Now, like you said, that may not last long, right? Because what happens next is, right, something happens, it stimulates a thought, you identify with the thought, and now you're back in the daydream dream.
Yep.
Instead of the night dream, right?
Actually, that moment when you first wake up, you actually laugh sometimes.
Yeah. It's a relief, isn't it? Yeah, it's a relief. So the thing is, so if you wake up, right, and then you go into the daydream dream, and in the daydream dream, the same kinds of things happen in the night dream, right? You feel threatened, right? You're anxious. You start thinking about what's going to happen today, what happened yesterday, and so forth. So you're in the daydream dream. So how do you get out of the daydream dream? Yeah. So the thing is, in the nighttime dream, it's automatic. When you wake up, you're automatically here, right? In the daydream dream, there is no automatic waking up, right? You have to source the wake up in the daydream dream. How do you source the wake up in the daydream dream? You have to first recognize that your attention is in the activity of thinking. Your attention is consumed by the mental activity, right? That's the mind. So what does the Zen teacher say? Your relationship to that mind and that mental activity determines the quality of your life, right? So what is your relationship to that mental activity that determines your quality of your life? What is the nature of the way you're relating to that mental activity that's going to determine whether the quality of your life is good or bad?
Whether you identify with it.
Whether you identify with it, right? In other words, whether you recognize that thoughts are thoughts. If you don't recognize, now, see, this is easy to say, but it's a whole nother ball game. By recognizing that a thought is a thought, and a thought about that is a thought, and a thought about that is a thought, and a thought about that is a thought. Now, your orientation that allows you to do that is called presence. You hear that word presence? Eckhart Tolle talks about it all the time, presence. What's that mean, right? If my attention is being sucked into these thought processes, right? And I can identify them as thoughts, but like you said, when I identify a thought as a thought, that's another thought about thinking. So I've got to somehow break out of that, right? Right. So how do I break out of that? All that's not real, right? That's the daydream dream, not real. Okay. So what is real?
Breath.
Okay, that's part of it.
The present moment.
The present moment. What is real is what's actually happening, right? So what does Eckhart Tolle tell us to do to come out of that condition? What's he tell us to do? Very simple thing. Look around the room.
Stay in the present focus.
Focus on what's actual. Feel your body. Use your senses. Use the five senses. Use the gates, right? Use the gates to pay attention to what's actual. The floor, my knee, my hand. This is bringing me out of what's not real to what's real, right? And when I come out of what's not real to what's real, it allows me to experience that I am real. Yeah? The senses are what we use to make conscious contact with what? What's actually happening. Make conscious contact. If somebody around you is going into some kind of mental state that's not real, they're in a delusional state, right? That's kind of dangerous because they might do things that are dangerous, right? One of the things that somebody who understands how the mind works will tell you to do is to go to them and say, look at me, make eye contact with me, look at me, look at me. Why? Because it's bringing them into reality. It's bringing them into conscious contact with you. And if they make conscious contact, the conscious contact will allow them to come out of the thought activity which is not real. That's called presence, being present, right? Most human beings are not present. They're living in a state of mind, right? So your relationship to the state of mind will determine the quality of your life, and that relationship to the state of mind that will determine the quality of your life involves recognizing that what's happening there is not real. It's not real. Therefore, you need not to relate to it as if it's real. And if you don't relate to it as if it's real, right, it will allow you to experience what is real, right? And what is the realest of reality? The senses are the gateway to make conscious contact with what's happening around us, right? That's real, right? What else is real?
The breath.
Yeah, that's making contact, conscious contact with what's there. That's what's happening. See, when you make conscious contact, right, is it not so that what's making the conscious contact is real? And that's you, the natural state. In the same way, when you are caught up in the thought activity, it produces the illusion that there's a thinker of the thoughts. In the same way, when you're making conscious contact with what is real, it produces the experience of the natural state, which is what's real is making contact with reality. That's the experience of being aware of being aware. It's the experience of being aware of your true nature. And that true nature is stillness. It's stillness. To make conscious contact with the senses does not involve activity, it involves stillness. Just be still. Be still. Be still and know what's real, and be still and know that I am God. The generic term for that that's a lot easier for people to digest is awareness. Same thing. Be still and know that I am awareness. Be still and know that I am real. Be still and know that the conscious contact that I am making through my senses is real. And when I am in conscious contact with the senses are seeing, and when I am experiencing that which is making that conscious contact, what is not real is obviously not real. And what is not real cannot threaten you. That goes right back to that summary statement from the Course in Miracles. What is real cannot be threatened, and what is not real doesn't exist. But what is not real that doesn't exist is taken to be real by almost everybody, right? So the first thing you have to do is see that what is not real is not real. And when you see that what is not real, then it doesn't exist, and what doesn't exist can't harm you. Like a dream, right? A dream can't harm you, it's not real. So this has to be practiced, right? Because what we've done since the beginning of learning to talk and use language, what we've done is we've lived in a hypnotic state of a thought reality. We've lived in a hypnotic state of a thought reality. And hypnosis is a good word to describe it, because hypnosis is very hard to come out of, isn't it? Very hard to come out of. But it is possible to come out of if you practice consistently and if you make yourself available to the truth the way you made yourself available to the lies. What do I mean by that? When you went to school as a child, you made yourself available to the conceptual understandings that most people consider to be true, right? So in order to come out of that, that's why they call the coming to these meetings, you know, the word they use in the East to describe these kinds of meetings is satsang. And the word satsang means meetings of the truth. So every time you come to a meeting like this and you are exposed to the truth, it weakens the lie. Every time you hear the truth, it weakens the lie. But if you only hear it occasionally, the lie has the advantage. If you only hear it occasionally, then the thought process and the mental activity and the concepts and the belief have the advantage because they play most of the time, and every once in a while you get a little bit of truth. It can't hold up. It won't hold up. It won't hold up. And the other thing that's important to understand is that even when you can take in the truth, it's being taken in at a level of concepts. It's being taken in as an intellectual understanding, right? That's the only way you can get it in the beginning, right? It's an intellectual understanding, right? If you persist, and as I have said here before, persistence is the key. If you persist, you cannot fail, okay? Anything you persist at, you cannot fail, right? If you persist, which means you keep coming to the class, you keep making sure you pay attention to the truth, you keep looking at reading, you keep listening to the teachings, you keep practicing meditation. If you keep doing this, right, eventually what will happen is this intellectual understanding, right, will go deeper. It'll go from the head to the heart. It'll go deeper, and when it goes deeper, you'll begin to experience the end of the personality. This is sometimes called the dark night of the soul. The end of the personality is when you begin to experience complete despair and hopelessness. But if you have a teacher and a teaching and a sangha and a group to support you, then you understand what's happening, right? So you don't freak out. And you can tolerate the process, and you can tolerate the final throes and the final desperation of the personality to try and maintain its existence, right? And that will pass, and once that passes, right, then you are experiencing the actual freedom, not just as an intellectual understanding, but as an actual heartfelt experience, which means that you now have access to the experience of yourself as unconditional love. If I could pay attention, that's the thing that will determine the quality of your life, because what are you paying attention to? The mental activity. Why are you paying attention to that? So you could see what's going on there that is not real. It's not that it's all not real, but you can see when it's not real, and when it's not real, you don't allow yourself to identify with it. Simple as that. When it is real, it's the working mind. Then you just use it. It's a practical matter. It's not a problem.
So the working mind is kind of a gateway also to awareness.
In the sense that when you're using it, if you're making conscious contact with what you're doing, yeah, then you're present.
Right.
Yeah, simple as that.